Hi and welcome to this week's Ret Vlog, and I'm going to have a little look at some of the wrinkles of Azerite traits with a little mention of trinkets at the end as well. So the first thing to point out, if what you want is just a big old list of sims of different traits, of different trinkets, then of course, you know, Hammer of Wrath Discord, the Ret Paladin Discord go in the FAQ. Skeletor and I think Thordross's websites will have those on for you. What I'm just going to go out, my attitude is always when you get a piece of gear, what you need to do is sim it and see where it will be useful. But there are a few things potentially to watch out for. So the things to, I think, bear in mind when it comes to Azerite traits, which I'm going to mostly focus on here. The questions people will ask is, it's all very well looking at a table of sims and going, okay, well, this piece of gear is better than this. For example, in Uldir, there are two helms on offer. You've got the Grid Runner Galea and you've got the Helm of the Defiled Laboratorium. Some big names in there. You can sort of tell we're into the 8th expansion now, so you can, is it the 8th expansion or the 7th expansion, but the 8th form in the game, I suppose it is. And you can sort of tell, can't you, that they're running out of names for things. They're just giving wackier and wackier names. But anyway, so the Grid Runner and the Helm of Blue. So a few questions may well be, okay, so let's say I have these two pieces and the sim says that piece B is better, but in actual fact, the level that my neck is at, I can't unlock all the traits for that. Questions about that, and that's where simming it using raid bots is going to be preferable for it. In terms of choosing the traits, though, it's much more straightforward. There's realistically only one thing you have to worry about because of the even raid gear, the 4 traits. One of them, the last one you get, is just a straight up item level increase. One of them is the utility thing. If one of the choices for the utility thing is speed, take that. Just take that. After that, you're just going to need to see which is going to be most useful. One of them, all right, can improve your DPS, but there's usually, because one of them is for effectively DPS, one for us, one's for healing, one's for tanking. Because we have 3 different specs that cover 3 different roles, it's fairly obvious which to take in that ring. So it's only the very first choice where we actually have a choice, and usually it's between 2. So, for example, for those helms you can get in Uldir, the Grid Runner Galea has a choice of 2 traits. You've got Archive of the Titans and you've got Divine Right. Now, Divine Right is the one where if your target, or if there's anything around you within 8 yards, I suppose, that is below 20% health and you hit it with a Divine Storm, that you get a primary stat buff. Okay? It's not actually all that great. If you're out solo and you've got this, it can be worth using a Divine Storm to give yourself that buff, but it's not all that awesome. But it's decent, it's pretty good. And then you've got the Archive of the Titans. Now what this does is gives you a stacking primary stat, but it also has the re-origination array. Now this is on a couple of traits in Uldir. It's a special little bonus additional to the trait, but it only works in Uldir. And what that does is increases your best stat, your best secondary stat, but only works while you're in Uldir. So you need to take account of that. If you're going to be simming it as well, and you're simming it and you're thinking to yourself for dungeon use, not use in Uldir, then you need to disable that augmentation in raid bots or something like that. If you click on the advanced options, you can do that. Because yeah, you're going to get more use for it in the raid than you are outside of the raid. The other helm, you've got the Helm of the Defiled Laboratorium, and you've got Laser Matrix on that, which is the super duper good one. That's basically Arcane Pew Pew, but that will split damage across various things. But also it does a little bit of healing to allies, and that's another little consideration. Certain abilities, certain traits, certain trinkets even, and this is something to watch out for as BFA rolls out, may well have some benefits to others as well as yourself. And there it's a case of thinking, even if it doesn't sim as the best DPS, if there's not much difference between that and what does sim as the best DPS, and you're getting some benefit to allies, okay, in this particular one it's a little bit of healing, you can probably do without that, you would hope anyway. But sometimes it's a little bit of extra DPS for others. You may need to consider if, in the interests of the team, it's potentially better to take those. And then the other trait available is Indomitable Justice, which is the one where Judgment does more damage as long as your percentage health is greater than your target's. So make friends with a healer, then your Judgment will do more damage. Again, the Laser Matrix is the one that's got the Reorigination Array, so that one's going to have an extra bonus in Uldir there. So what I did, basically, I thought to myself, well, let's say you go through normal, so 355 pieces. Just watch out when you're in raid bots, by the way, because the default item level for these is 350, and there are no 350 ones. So 355 for normal. And so I came out with some sims, and it was looking like the two best ones were the Grid Runner Galea with Divine Right was basically exactly on par with the Helm of the Defiled Laboratorium with the Laser Matrix. There wasn't really anything to separate those two, but in Uldir, the Reorigination Array. So then what I thought, because your next question is, so with those, of course, it's the same item, the same level of neck needed to unlock the different traits. So you don't have to worry too much about that. But then you might think to yourself, so let's say I have this thing as a normal mode thing, but this other one as a heroic. So I did another set of sims where I was looking at the weaker or the weaker trait on a 370 item compared to the stronger trait on a 355. And what I was still getting out of it is the Laser Matrix is pretty good. You are better off getting the Helm of the Defiled Laboratorium with Laser Matrix at normal level than one of the weaker, the weaker one on heroic. So in terms of because you might hope, for example, that item level is just going to be king, and it's like just always take the better item level one. And in case of the particular helms, that is certainly true in this case, by the way, because of course you wouldn't take the weaker trait anyway for you. Although it has to be borne in mind again, what is the strongest trait for single target may not be the strongest trait for AoE. So if you're wanting gear not only for your Uldir raiding, but for Mythic Plus dungeons, you get used to the fact that you might want either two completely different pieces of gear for that slot, which is fine. We're used to that in the past anyway. Or maybe the same piece of gear with two different traits. Again, you want to sim. And when you're simming, remember the difference. Mostly for raid bosses, you'd be looking at patchwork fights. Yes, we're not always going to be static, stood still, or anything like that. But largely the most important damage is single target damage. So a patchwork sim tends to be better for that. But in a dungeon, okay, it depends upon the affixes, but generally speaking, what you're going to spend most of your time on is the trash. So Hectic Ad Cleave is generally where you want to go there. Of course, if it's not just about time, but success, if you're going to be pushing a high key and you know that the real stumbling block is going to be, can you kill this one boss before it kills you? Then potentially, okay, you could go into a dungeon with traits that are more geared towards single target, because of course you can't change your gear in Mythic Plus. But I mean, one little thing we should just say on Azerite traits in terms of Azerite gear, we can at least trade Azerite armor now. I was someone who actually sort of understood why Blizzard made it untradeable. I know that it sucked, but they have relented. They have decided actually on balance, maybe the cons of being able to trade it are not as great as the cons of not being able to trade it, so they've relented on that one. So one little tricky area. So like for the helm, ideally what you would get is the Helm of the Defiled Laboratorium with Laser Matrix selected there. But for shoulders, it's a little trickier. There are only one set of shoulders. So there's two helms available in Uldir, and there's two chests. And the chest you would use there is the chest plate of Apocalyptic Machinations. Another great name there. Again with Laser Matrix, double up on the old Laser Matrix, Arcane Pew Pew. But in terms of shoulders, so you've got the Chitin Spine Pauldrons, for which you can select the Archive of the Titans. That's fine. However, there's the Pauldrons of the Horned Horror with Relentless Inquisitor selected. For the same item level, works out better. You gain that, you get that from dungeons, and it's not really worth worrying about which dungeons to do, by the way, when it comes to these, because at the moment, like literally at the moment I'm recording this, you can target them, because in normal dungeons, heroic dungeons, and Mythic Naught dungeons, then the pieces drop in those dungeons themselves. But in Mythic Plus, once you start getting to +2 and so on, the Azerite gear is not going to be, unless they change that as well, is not going to be dropping in those dungeons. I don't think they will change that. So there is no targeting dungeons when it comes to Azerite pieces. You get all your Azerite pieces from Mythic Plus from your weekly cache. So don't even worry about that one too much. But yes, technically speaking, so I did some sims here with the Pauldrons of the Horned Horror, which is the one with Relentless Inquisitor, which is the better one. And I did that as an item level 370. And then I compared it with the Chitin Spine Pauldrons, which is the one you can get from Uldir, and I did that as both a heroic, which is a 370, as well as a mythic piece, which is 385. Okay, so it might be with some guilds will be able to farm that quite early on. Drops from Vectus, I believe. And if you can get the 385 one and your alternative is a Pauldrons of the Horned Horror 370, well, the mythic shoulders are going to be better, even though on par. But of course, if you can get access to the 385 dungeon ones, the Pauldrons of the Horned Horror, then you would use those ones. Those ones will work out better. Even taking into account the re-origination array, I mean, don't overstate how good that is. It's a little bonus. It's not anything that's throwing anything out of whack. You can see the difference in power between the different ones here on the sim worked out at roughly 1%. So Chitin Spine Pauldrons, which are from Uldir, is about on that one it's 1.3%, but you know, little variation every time you sim it between the one you can get from the dungeon at the same item level. So it's significantly better. The Indomitable Justice is what am I talking about? Relentless Inquisitor that drops off the shoulder, sorry, is significantly better than the Archive of the Titans. So it's worth getting on the same item level, but at a higher item level, it's not so much. Because remember, on the higher item level, the primary stat. The primary stat is actually really good for us, which is also worth, just a little side note, making sure you do get yourself a strength gem, because the primary stats are significantly, they sim your own stats, but it should be simming significantly ahead of secondary stats. So you can only have one strength gem anyway, but get a strength gem and then the rest of them, whatever you need it to be. I quite like haste, even when it's not always simming the best, as long as it's not simming far behind. And that's pretty much it for that. So just when you get a piece of gear, when you get a piece of Azerite armor from your weekly cache, just sim it for Patchwork, for Hectic Adcleve. Decide if it's going to be worth it for either Mythic Plus dungeons where you just want to go in there and beat all the trash up, or is it worth it for raid bosses, or just Mythic Plus dungeons where you really need to get the boss down. In advance, of course, it is worth simming the different variations of the helm, shoulders and chest from Uldir, because of course there in a raid group you're going to have to decide whether you want it, how much of an upgrade it is for you and things like that. As I say, in the dungeon, because you're not targeting it, it's not you're going to get it in your weekly cache. You've got time to sim it there and then. In a raid, of course, or advance of a raid, in a lot of raid guilds, of course, you will have to put down what is your BIS list, for want of a better word. And as I say, what you'd ideally want for Azerite abilities are Helm of the Defiled, Laboratorium, Laser Matrix, Pauldrons of the Horned Horror, but that's from a dungeon, so you don't put that down in your BIS list for your guild, because they can't possibly give you that. So what you're realistically saying is Chitin Spine Pauldrons, the only shoulders that are in there with Archive of the Titans. You can always just put a little note that says, if from the dungeons you get that one at the same item level, then you won't be using the raid one. And the chest plate of Apocalyptic Machinations with a Laser Matrix. Now, when it comes to trinkets, just one little thing. The issue is trinkets have been a bit up and down at the moment for two reasons. One, Blizzard have been tuning them up and down. The old Bygone Bee has been one, because, and the other reason I'll just get onto as well, is implementation in Simcraft. Trinkets tend to be very funny bunnies. They're odd. They're very strange. And so sometimes getting them implemented to behave correctly in Simcraft can take a little while. So the Beehive Bee, for both of those reasons, has been a bit up and down. The current state of affairs is it's supposed to be decent. For its item level, remember, it's a set item level. Whereas the other one you could buy from the auction house, the Dark Moon Chaos Fathoms, people ask me about that. Now, in the first week, absolutely great that you buy this because at the end of the day, it's like a 355 piece. And as far as that goes, yes, it's going to be loads better than other things you're likely to be getting there. Now that we can access some 350 trinkets potentially from Mythic North Dungeons, and, you know, many of you are going to be going on into Uldir, and you've got access to some good ones there, it is going to fall significantly behind. If you're asking, how is the Dark Moon Card Fathoms trinket compared to quite a lot of other trinkets of the same item level, it doesn't stack up that great. You are likely to be replacing it. In other words, if you don't already have one, and you are going to be doing either Mythic Plus Dungeons or Uldir Raid, or both, and you don't have a load of gold, in other words, it would be a significant dent in your gold supply, it might not be worth getting it unless you've got a particular reason for getting it, because you are likely to be replacing it quite soon, or you would hope so. Obviously, you need the drops. It's one of those things. It may well be that some of you have already replaced it with, you know, Beehive, the Bygone Bee, sorry, and maybe another good one from the dungeons. But the reason why I don't really want to talk about specific ones here is because I'm not 100% that they're all fully correctly implemented in Simcraft yet. That's one thing. Secondly, trinkets are a prime candidate for Blizzard to monkey about with, let's say, a week into the raid. So some of the ones that don't look that great at the moment, and I don't mean the Dark Moon Fair card, I don't think they would necessarily go, oh, that's too weak, let's bung it up. I think what they want you to, because you can buy that, I think what they want you to do is to go into Uldir and Mythic Plus Dungeons, of course, to get replacements for that. So if any of them look really weak then, a couple do, then they may well buff those. If some of them look too strong, then they may well nerf those. So I'd sort of rather wait a week or two to comment on those. But same thing again, if you just look at Skeletor Thordus's site, they keep those up to date, and if anything changes, either with the implementation in Simcraft or the tuning from Blizzard, they tend to update those very, very quickly. Of course, that's the benefit of doing things on a website. You can update something super quickly. When I do a video like this, unfortunately, I can't. I remember the very first proper guide I ever did for Ret Paladins, like the first proper one that I did for a new patch, and it was in Warlords of Draenor, and it was for the Hellfire Citadel patch, and there was a particular trinket that was looking, I can't even remember what it's called now, but it was absolutely awesome. It was like, you want this, even if you're a Mythic Raider, and if you can get it on normal mode, it's way better than the stuff you can get on Mythic. Now, of course, that should have been a bit of a hint that they were going to nerf it at some point, but it got all the way up to release, and it wasn't nerf, so I released the guide. As soon as I released it, day later, they nerfed it. And that's the sort of thing that can easily happen with, more likely to happen with trinkets than anything else. Could also happen with Azerite traits, of course. It could happen with any number of things, but it is quite likely to happen with trinkets. So if I start reeling off the 2 or 3 best trinkets for both single target and a hectic cleave, well, those are also the candidates that are ready for a nerf. And if I start to say these particular trinkets are a load of shit, don't take them, they're the prime candidates for a buff. So anyway, I've put links to those sites down below so you can check those out if what you want is a list. But I do recommend that actually what you do is to sim these things. Use the nightly build option on raid bots. I think that's default anyway, but if it's not, check the nightly build, because that's where you're getting the most up-to-date ones. If you're just picking the weekly one, then Simcraft might have had a load of updates, but you're doing it from the last week, so you're not necessarily getting those updates either. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share with other people who might also be interested. And until next time, I'll see you later.